welcome to my channel. I am the Bloody Baroness, and this is Eerie Echoes. This story is not about a ghost or an encounter with a creepy stranger. It's not even about a near-death experience or something like that. As a matter of fact, I was never in danger during the event I'm about to tell you about. Nonetheless, it's a disturbing memory that I will carry with me until the day I die. I grew up in a small city, the kind of place you could barely call a town if it wasn't for the sheer number of people living there. Downtown was only a couple of blocks long, and in the middle of it was one of the biggest buildings in the area. It was the local movie theatre, named after the city. I remember going there when I was very young, about 7 years old, and watching the first Pokemon movie. It was probably nothing compared to the theatres we have nowadays, but back then it was huge for me and I loved it. So when a few years later I heard the cinema was going out of business, I felt really sad about it. The building was sold to a religious group that used it for their services. You know the type. Loud music, big crowds with their arms in the air, singing prayers. Some having seizures on stage while the pastor yells through a mic. Every time I walked past the old cinema, I would see the announcements of the congregation where the movie posters would have been. And if they were in session, you could hear them singing from the other side of the street. This group owned the cinema for nearly a decade, until the local government bought back the building in order to restore it to a historic landmark of the city. When this happened, I was studying construction with the intent of following architecture or civil engineering at college, and my class was very lucky to be involved in the cinema's restoration project because two of our teachers were architects working on it. I will always remember the day we went to visit our old cinema. Our class was small, only a handful of students, but we were all around the same age, so we all shared childhood memories of when the cinema was operational. We ran through the corridors of the auditorium, sat in the chairs, just like we did when we were little kids, and began stomping on the wooden floors with our feet, filling the entire room with echoes of our drumming and our laughters. A little ritual of sorts. Everyone used to do it right before the beginning of the movie. Once nostalgia time was over, we went back to the purpose of the trip. We began to survey the building. We were very excited because that was a unique opportunity to go into the places we would never have been allowed to otherwise. So we made sure to check every last corner, every single room, no matter how far, no matter how obscure. The first one we found was below the stage. One of the corners there was a little door, not very visible, probably because it was meant for maintenance stuff only. Behind it, we found a long room filled with rusty boilers, parts of the old heating system that was no longer in use. The place was a little creepy, with all of those old tanks and pipes crowding the narrow space, but what we found past them was what really started to freak us out. This room was small, very small. It was, after all, basically just leftover space behind the boilers. Yet it contrasted so much with the rest of the area around it. It may as well have been from a different place altogether. The walls were painted a light colour, white I think, but I don't really remember it very well because what really got my attention were the drawings in them. There were rainbows, a smiling sun, trees, flowers, happy little people with smiles on their faces with dotted eyes. It was a daycare. The whole class and teachers gathered to see the discovery. We were all very confused about the strange placing of this room. Okay, we could understand that there was a need for a place to keep the kids that were too little to be amongst the crowd during prayers, or maybe the ones of the people who worked there, but the place was just odd. The stage was probably one of the loudest places in the auditorium during the services, and this was right below it, so there was no way it could be a quiet place for the children. We left the boilers room and continued our tour through the theatre, a little puzzled about our finding, but not giving it too much thought. Outside of the auditorium there were bathrooms, both in terrible condition. The ticket sales booth, and a huge set of stairs that led to the mezzanine in the auditorium. Half of the seats were totally ruined due to a water leak in the roof, and I cursed these people for not taking proper care of the building. With that part done, all that was left was the project room on the third floor. Behind the ticket booths, there was a door that led to the spiral staircase. I don't remember how tall it was, but it must have been over 10 meters of metallic steps without a single resting spot. I wasn't exactly an athlete, but I could walk several kilometers with no problem, and rode on a bike to and from school every single day. Yet by the time I reached the top of those stairs, I was exhausted, and I wasn't the only one. All of my classmates complained about how hard it was to walk up there. After a short break to catch our breath, we moved on to explore the third floor. It was roughly a narrow passway with a couple of divisions to form different rooms, but it was more than enough for what it was made for. The first room from the stairs was a storage deposit, probably where they kept the movies and other equipment, and except for some trash, it was mostly empty. The second room was the one we're all excited to see. The projection room. The old machine was so big that it was still there, and there were even some pieces scattered around. It was quite a piece of history, and we were all very thrilled to check it out. So no one really bothered to move on to the very last room until we were about to leave. And there, we saw it again. There was a train in this one instead of a rainbow. Something was written on it in big, colourful letters, something about Christ, and I can't remember it well. The drawings were a bit old, the paint slightly peeled from the walls, but the colours were just as cheerful as you would expect from a place where children play. My heart sunk to my stomach as I came to the realisation of what that place really was. The one behind the boilers probably serving the same purpose. I took notice of how isolated that room was, literally the furthest away you could possibly get from anyone else. I thought about the 3 floors of stairs and imagined what it would have been like to a child to walk all the way up, only to end up in that room, the room with the colourful train in the wall. My classmates and I exchanged horrified expressions as I knew they were thinking the same. We never visited the theatre again, even though we continued with the restoration project for several months. We never talked about those 2 rooms. Cases of molestation in church are well known by everyone, to the point that the pedo priest is practically a cliche. But this is the kind of thing you think happens in some place far away, in another city, even in another country. You never imagine it can happen in the very same town you live, the place where you grew up, in the very same building where you once watched a Pokemon movie when you were 7 years old.